أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما رب زدني علما رب زدني علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have finished with the first and second part of the first lesson. Now we will move on to the third part of the lesson. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into its envelope. Now for the first and second part of the lesson, we have gone through the letter. Now the author has folded back the letter and he has put back into the envelope, and he kept awake all night. I kept awake all night. By morning I knew what I had to do. So he was planning the night, all night he was thinking of going and delivering the letter to this to Mrs. Macpherson. So he was really disturbed after he read through the letter. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. So he got the address, so he thought he will go and find out from there. So I drew into Bridport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beaches was. So house number 12, that was the address which was written on the cover, and turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell. So burned out shell means it was destroyed by fire. The whole house was destroyed by fire. Something had, the building had caught fire. That was the house where Mrs. Macpherson had lived. The roof gaping, the windows boarded up. You can see when when the house is caught by the fire, what happens? Everything will be, the wooden frames will be eaten up by the fire. The whole thing will be engulfed by the fire. So he could see the windows, the glasses will be broken, isn't it? For the fire, the heat of the fire, the glass windows, the window panes will be broken up. So it was boarded up. So they had put boards, like otherwise exposed windows, some animals can creep in and they can get into the house. So they had put boarded up means covered with wooden boards. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of Mrs. Macpherson. So he goes to the neighbor's house, and he knocks at the door and asks where Mrs. Macpherson is. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. So he was wearing slippers. So he says he knew her well, because definitely he's his neighbor, a lovely old lady. He told me, a bit muddle-headed. What is muddle-headed? Confused because of her age. Definitely she cannot have a perfect mind, isn't it? She's very old, so memory is lost, isn't it? When you get old age, you will lose your memory, you cannot remember everything. So a confusion, she muddle-headed, she was confused in her mind, muddle-headed, and not only that, she was all alone, staying all alone. Definitely a person, when they are alone, they'll be really upset. So muddle-headed, but at her age she was entitled to be. So it is nothing wrong for her to have that. Wasn't she 101 years old? So what was her age? She was 101 years old. She had been in the house when it caught fire. So she was at home when the house caught fire. No one really knew how the fire had started. So nobody knows, because others cannot know, isn't it? And she is old, she may not be able to say what had happened because of her age. So how it had started, but it could well have been candles. So they are guessing that she would have been burning candles. She uses candles rather than electricity. So when they are old, they may not have regular income. So she was using candle, means it becomes very cheap, and she's all alone. So she thinks not to light up the house with electricity, and she may have to pay a lot. So she was using candle So the neighbor says she uses candles rather than electricity because she always thought electricity was too expensive. The firemen had got her out just in time. So in time they had come there and they had got her out. She was in a nursing home now, he told me. So she was in a no, nursing home, Burlington House, on the Dorchester Road, on the other side of the town. So on the other side of the town, in the Dorchester Road, the Burlington House was situated. So the author gets the place, the location where she is now in, and so he proceeds to that place. Now, why did the author go to Bridport? Why did the author go to Bridport? Because the author wanted to find Mrs. Macpherson and deliver her the letter. How old was Mrs. Macpherson now? Where was she? She was 101 years old. I found Burlington House nursing home easily enough. There were paper chains up in the hallway, and a lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with a lopsided angel on top. So it was all decorated because of Christmas. So the author found the place, and there was the Christmas tree with the lopsided angel on top. I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. Macpherson. So he goes and asks for Mrs. Macbeth to bring her a Christmas present. So he says, I have brought her a Christmas present. So I could see through into the dining room. So he was standing out and he could see through into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. Because of Christmas, everybody was enjoying. The matron had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. So the matron was happy to see him. She even offered me a mince pie. She walked me along the corridor. So took him along inside. Mrs. Macpherson is not in with the others. So she says, so Mrs. Macpherson is not with the others. She told me she is rather confused today, so we thought it best if she had a good rest. So they've asked her to be not there because she was confused, and the matron has thought that if she needs a little rest. She has no family, no one visits. So she has no relatives. Her husband has passed away and she had no visitors. So she has no family, no one visits. So I am sure she'll be only too pleased to see you. So the author says that the matron says that she'll be very pleased to see you. She took me into the conservatory with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. So that the place where she was, so the author was taken by the matron to this place where she was seated, and conservatory with wicker chairs. They had wicker chairs and potted plants, and there he leaves her and goes. The old lady was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. So hands were folded on her lap. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. So silver white means she had grey hairs and it was pinned into a wispy bun. She was gazing out at the garden. She was looking out at the garden. Hello, I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly. So when the author said hello, she looked up at him because she never had any visitors. Happy Christmas, Connie, I went on. I found this. I think it's yours. So he addresses her as Happy Christmas, Connie. I went on. I found this. I think it's yours. As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. She was staring at the author's face. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. So he opens that tin box. He has brought along with the tin box and he gives it to her. That was the moment her eyes lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with a sudden glow of happiness. Now we can see the author finds her face, her expression changed. That was the moment. Her eyes lit up, it became bright with recognition. So she recognizes, and her face became suffused. Suffused means with the glow of happiness. There was happiness spread all over her face. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. So the author is explaining to her about all about the desk and how he had found it, but she was not listening because she's too old to be concentrating on what the author was saying. For a while she said nothing but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. So she takes the letter and she strikes it with stroke it tenderly, like how we have, if we have a pet in our lap, or a fluffy doll or something, or a stuffed doll, or teddy bear, how we will tenderly we will strike it, and the stroke, she stroked it that way. Then suddenly she reached out and took my hand, and now what she's doing, suddenly she's taking the author's hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. Now she is having tears in her eyes. You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest. So she thinks now. She said, and here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come close, Jim, dear, sit down. Now she's thinking this person is her husband who has come back after the war. So she's mistaken this author for her husband. And she says, you had promised me you would come back for Christmas, and now you are here, and come close and sit down near me. I sat down beside her and she kissed my cheek. I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. So she's telling her like as if he is Jim. And I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me. And now you are. Now she feels every time I used to read the letter to feel that you were with me. But now you are here with me. Now you are back. You can read it to me yourself. Now she's telling the author to read the letter by himself. And would you do that for me, Jim dear? So she's mistaken this man for her husband. Now I just want to hear your voice again. I'd love that so much, and then perhaps we'll have some tea. So she thinks of having tea together. I made you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan all around. I know how much you love marzipan. So her husband used to love to have Christmas cake with marzipan. That is what we had got the earlier we came to know, isn't it? He had brought that Christmas cake with marzipan and he had shared it with the German officer. So that is what we had come to know. So she says now that I have made a nice Christmas cake with marzipan for you all around. You can have it and come closer and sit near me, and I want to hear you to read this letter for me. So she is still in her, she's not conscious of what has happened. So the story ends here, and the author is Michael Moore Pogo, and the lady Connie, Mrs. Connie, mistakes this author for her husband. So it's a very sad story, isn't it? So when people go for war, they never come back. I think we have finished with the question and answers. Now we will go with the working with the language. Look at the sentences from the story. I spotted it in a junk shop in Bridport. The man said it was made in the early 19th century. This one was in a bad condition. The italicized verbs are in the past tense. They tell us what happened in the past, before now. I spotted it. So spotted means I had already found it. So that is in the past tense. Read the passage below and underline the verbs in the past tense. A man got on the train. Now got is the past tense. Get is the present tense. Got is the past tense. On the train. And sat. Sit is the present tense. Sat is the sat down. You can mark those, underline those words. The compartment was empty except for one lady. Was. Is will be, the compartment is empty is present tense. Was is past tense. She took. Take is present tense. Took her gloves off. A few hours later. All these words you can underline. The police arrested the man. Arrest is present tense. Arrested is past tense. They held. Hold is the present tense, and held him for 24 hours and then freed. Free is the present tense. Freed is past tense. Now this is called, now look at these sentences. Now these are in the past tense. The verbs are in the past tense. Now look at these sentences. The veneer had lifted almost everywhere. Both fire and water had taken their toll on this desk. Now had lifted and had taken, had lifted and had taken their toll on this desk. Notice the verb forms had lifted and had taken their toll. The author found and brought the desk in the past. The author had found and brought the desk. They are in the past. Now the desk was damaged before the author found it and bought it. So it was all damaged before he found it and bought it. Now fire and water had damaged the desk before the author found it and bought it. Had damaged. So we use verb forms like had damaged for an event in the earlier past. So that is in the earlier past. Had damaged is in the earlier past. Now if there are two events in the past, we use the had form for the event that occurred first in the past. So when there are two when there are two events in the past, we use the had form for the event that occurred in the first in the past. We also use the past perfect tense to show that something was wished for or expected before a particular time in the past. For example, I had always wanted one. I had always wanted one. Now, when I reached the station, the train left. That is in the past. When I reached the station, the train had left. That is in the earlier past. Now, filling the blanks using the correct form of the verbs in the brackets. My little sister is very naughty. So, when she came, the word is given there. The verb is given as come. Come is in the present tense. So when we say it in the past, we'll say it as when she came back from school yesterday. She had torn. Tear is there. So you will use the word torn. She had torn. Past, no? Earlier past. She had torn her dress. We ask is there. That is in the present form. So in the past, we'll say we asked her how it had happened. Happen is in the present. Happened is in the past. She said, say is in the present, said is in the past. She said she had quarrel. Have past tense is had. Quarrel past tense is quarreled with a boy. She have past tense had. She had. Beat is in the present and beaten is in the past. She had beaten him in a race and he have past had. She had. Try past tried to push her. She have past had. Told. Tell past tense told. She had told the teacher, and so had have past tense had, and chase past tense chased her, and she had fallen down, and had have past tense had, and tear past tense torn her dress. Now underline the verbs and arrange them in two columns, past and earlier past. Now in the sentence you have two verbs. My friend set out to see the caves in the next town, but I stayed at home because I had seen them already. So set out is in the past and stayed also is a past, and had seen is in the earlier past. When they arrived in the past, when they arrived at the station, their train left had left. They came back home, but that time I had gone and had left. They had time. I had gone out to see a movie. Had gone. The had left and had gone here, earlier past, and arrived and they came. Came is past tense. Now the third sentence. So they sat outside and ate also is a past, and ate the lunch I had packed is for them. That is in the earlier past. By the time I returned, they had fallen asleep. Now now we will move on to the next is determiners. Have to make the grammar before we do this exercise. So after we do the exercise, we can do that, inshallah. Now I will move on to the poem. The first poem, The Ant and the Cricket. Fable. What is a fable? Fable is a story, often with animals as characters. We have the animal. Here what do we have? We have the ant and the cricket as the characters that conveys a moral. It gives us a moral. It is conveying us a moral. This poem is about an ant and the cricket. I think it's time. Inshallah, we will do the next video and continue with the poem, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I hope you have done the notes. Complete your notes and you can send me the PDF, inshallah. Please go through. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.